So I saw this article about 3D printed guns, something I've talked about before, but I just want to mention a few more things pertaining to how 3D printed guns will make gun control legislation rudderless and futile. Let's think about the war on drugs for a moment. The government declares a war on drugs with the stated purpose of eradicating the scourge of drugs within society. Okay, so $1 trillion in a few decades later, and barely a dent or a scratch has been inflicted on this black market. Drugs need to either be manufactured or grown and put under several processes before they are ready to be sold and consumed. Many drugs require an extremely lengthy and risky process to go from manufacturer to consumer. Drugs also generally need to be transported lengthy distances. All of this creates a situation where the government has many opportunities to seize and destroy these drugs, yet they fail time and time again. And that is not necessarily a criticism of their abilities as law enforcement, it's more of a commentary on the impossibility of obtaining their goal of total eradication of drugs. The same is true for guns, and the same would be true for blueprints for a 3D printed gun. Now, never fear. As I've stated in the past, there are plenty of things you can do to curb gun violence without passing any laws. Gun violence, by the way, is dwindling every year that goes by, but that's another topic. So, I've said this before, but not watching the mainstream media when they're irresponsibly diving into the lives of shooters, which almost guarantees you will have copycat crimes, when another nutcase somewhere realizes they can be under the national spotlight if they commit some atrocity. Send that message to those that advertise on irresponsible media outlets, that you won't be watching if they're going to do this. They will get the point. Another thing is ending the war on drugs. Law enforcement might actually be able to respond to reports of a possible violent episode if they're not tied up with victimless drug offenses. Ending the war on drugs also makes it not profitable for gangs and drug dealers to kill one another to control the black market in their area. And it is not just those involved in the drug trade either. There are plenty of innocent people who get caught in the crossfire. You end the war on drugs and voila, those issues resolve themselves with no legislation necessary. In fact, you'd be getting rid of laws and many of these problems would be solved. 2 birds, 1 stone, not a bad deal. Okay, so there are several other things you can do to curb the dwindling gun violence in this country, but that's kind of another topic. I just wanted to mention a few quickly. But my point is that now that gun control legislation is becoming more and more of a moot and futile point, I can only draw the following conclusions about any politician still advocating for gun control. Number 1, they are interested in merely political points. If they are aware of the pointlessness of these laws, they are likely only interested in garnering more cheap political sway by advocating for something they know does not work. And number 2, politicians who still advocate for gun control are less interested in actually helping solve a problem and more interested in the second word in the term gun control. That's right, control. They get off on being able to control hundreds of millions of people. Why else would they support something that they know does not work? And as far as the everyday average person who supports gun control now, they are exhibiting those all too common symptoms of believing that simply because government passes a law about something, it will solve a problem. Gun control legislation has always arguably been ineffective. But now with 3D printing, it's a whole nother ballgame. So if you are an ordinary citizen who still pleads with politicians to just do something, I have to criticize you for having far too much faith in your politicians. You have an amount of faith that is necessary to believe that they can do anything, even the impossible. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but they cannot. But like I said, don't worry too much because as the years go by, gun violence has been going down consistently anyway. Not that you would know that by listening to the mainstream media or half of our politicians. All in all, like I said, gun control legislation has always been useless. But with 3D printing and the ability to create a gun or a weapon in your garage or your living room, gun control legislation has never been more futile than it is today. But that's all for now. Thanks.